Alrighty. Got oil dumping down here. So if you get a move on the NQ. We'll have Powell speaking at 11:30 in about an hour. Trump's talking to Netanyahu. Got some headlines regarding that. Not too many big orders on the Bookmap. What else do we have? Interest rate decisions already done. Oh no, it's at 11. Expected to have no change. Putin-Trump call lasted over 1.5 hours. Friendly and businesslike. Okay, we're getting some headlines. So be careful out there. Oh, here's some headlines. OPEC likely to agree oil oil output quota hike at Sunday meeting without UAE. We got some earnings today. Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Meta. Just put in a practice trade. All right, let's see if we break through VWAP with some intensity and stay above it and get bullish, or we remain below it. That would be bearish normally. All right, just sit and wait, I guess. All right, still below VWAP, which is at 27,234. Just setting on my ticker right now. All right, this long's not really playing out. Just give me a minute. All right, we're still waiting for Powell. Diego, thanks for stopping by. Appreciate that, brother. Doing all right. Doing better than yesterday. Up a little bit. Up like $800. Recovered most of that loss. $1,100. And you saw that I was down like 3,000, I think, at one point. How's your? Are you still in the combine, or are you past that? Thanks, Diego. I'm happy too. Would have been depressed for the next like 3-4 days. Did another 1K on the funded. Nice, buddy. So you're up like $2,000. Nice. Sweet, bro. Killing it. Are you FOMOing or just catching good trades? Trump meets with Artemis 2 astronauts at the White House. I don't really want to see that. But we're waiting for Powell. Should be coming to the podium 30 minutes or so. He's usually on time. You got a good short this morning? Sweet. I tried like 3-4 times. Well, you're up $1,000. That's some good trading. Yeah, small losses are the way to go. Don't do what I do. Well, any thoughts on what Powell's going to say? I think we had the interest rate decision. Oh, the interest rate decision's coming out in a minute, 40 seconds. And we got the FOMC statement, so watch out. Let's see. Let's see if anything happens. Got Google, Amazon, Meta, Qualcomm earnings too. Account is locked now? Perfect. Maybe do some practice. Just so you feel you're part of the market. Alright, we're about 1 minute away from the interest rate decision. I don't think they're going to move it or like reduce or add. Let's just see. Yeah, check out the poly market. 98% chance Powell says good afternoon. $20 from the interest rate decision. M&Q's at 27,245. Alright, let's see if we get an update. Alright, yeah. They just kept it at 3.75. Alright. That's that. Got a little movement here. A little wick action. Oh, it's not even little. That's 50, 60 points right there. Hey, why isn't the audio working?
consists of 7 members, or governors, who are nominated by the President of the United States and confirmed by the Senate.
Can you hear that?
Governors are appointed for 14-year terms. The Board of Governors oversees and sets policy direction for the system, including 12 Federal Reserve banks located around the country, which take the pulse of the nation's economic health from a regional perspective. The 12 reserve banks represent different geographic regions, or districts, and were set up based on regional economic considerations. Although supervised by the Federal Reserve Board, the reserve banks operate independently in many respects. The reserve banks carry out a number of core system functions, such as supervising and examining commercial banks and other financial institutions, enforcing compliance with federal consumer protection and fair lending laws, while promoting local community development and lending to depository institutions to ensure crucial liquidity in the financial system. They and the board also play a key role in another primary Fed function, fostering the safety and efficiency of our nation's payment systems, including distributing currency and coin to banks, operating electronic payment systems, and clearing our checks. In addition, the reserve banks act as the government's bank, providing services such as maintaining the Treasury Department's transaction account and issuing and redeeming U.S. government securities. They also act as a bank for banks by providing key financial services to banks, thrifts, and credit unions. The reserve banks also provide a wealth of information on conditions across the nation, information that is vital to formulating a national monetary policy that helps maintain a healthy U.S. economy and a stable financial system. The board and the reserve banks together.
Let's put this down. I don't know why this intro's playing. We're still like 28 minutes away from Powell stepping on the podium and saying his farewells. I wonder if there's a poly market for if Fed Powell's going to cry during the speech, if he gets emotional. All right, we're still dumping down. Kind of feel like taking a short here. How are you looking at the market right now, Diego? Feeling kind of bearish or bullish? We ran up quite a bit. I've been feeling bearish the last couple of days, but we just keep going up. Well, we got 2 people watching. That's cool. Thanks for stopping by. Come in the chat. Say, hey, what's up? Oh, I still got that go touch grass. My bad. I got 2 likes. That's nice. Thank you very much. Diego was definitely one of them. He's a true one. 1 second. All right, still waiting for Fed Powell. And we're still breaking down. Oil's at 107. Trying to come up again. Highs of today on oil is 107.68. Not too far. JP Morgan. The Fed is clearly moving towards symmetrical policy. We'll get some headlines from the Fed here. From the FOMC statement. It's probably pretty much essentially what the Fed chair is going to say. The committee seeks to achieve maximum employment and at inflation at the rate of 2% over the longer run. Six Iranian crew members of the Iranian-flagged container ship Tasuka were freed after seizure by U.S. 22 Iranians are still held. Okay, that's some new news coming out. Still pushing down. After that rate decision, we're almost down 100 points. Let's just throw in a practice trade, a short. Let's see if we continue down here. It's 100 contracts at 27,310 area on the NQ. So these decent size order. Nvidia still coming down. Nvidia's down 2.5% today now. Tesla's down 1.3. Meta's down a quarter. Apple's down 0.35. Microsoft's down 1.5. Intel's up 10%. SanDisk is up 7%. Visa's up 9%. JP Morgan, the Fed is telling us increasingly concerned about the price level. Well, 19 minutes away from Powell. It's like a 111-point move since the interest rate decision. Interesting. All right, now we're getting a little push up. All right, we got that wick down here. Are we going to reverse? Still got the 9-day moving average moving down pretty fast. That's definitely bearish. That's if we hold this range. It's a pretty big range. So it's almost a 200-point range right there. So if we stay in that or break out. All right, now it's reversing. Luckily, this is a practice account. Not too worried about it. That's okay. All right, we're about 14 minutes away from Powell. Let's see if he moves the market. Trump spoke with Putin today, talked about Ukraine and Iran. We had a very good conversation. let's put in a add to the short. Trump, Iran has a small percentage of missile making facilities. All right, I'm just going to go grab a drink. Let's get ready for Powell. All right. Let's wait for Powell, boys. Eight minutes away from Powell. Equities trying to roll over again, looks like. Order book's pretty thin. There's like 100 contracts at 27,000 to 27,310. Well, the short doesn't look like it's working out. Just on a practice account. Trump asked which war ends first. Maybe similar timetables for the Ukraine and Iran wars, eh? That pumped the market for sure. All right, we'll have Powell live here as soon as he comes on. All right, the order book's kind of thinning out. Not many orders. All right, 3 more minutes. We should see Powell coming up. Traders add to bets on Fed rate hike in 2027. Now see 45% chance. All right, still waiting for Powell. All right, we're kind of breaking down. We're back at my entry. This is just a practice trade, so definitely don't copy what I'm doing. Trump says good time to lower rates. All right, we're pushing down. We pushing down. All right, the feed's on. Let's put the audio on for that. I know a lot of people are probably streaming this, but it's something I want to watch too, so that's why we have it on. And here comes Powell with the red tie, or I guess the maroon tie. I don't know what. I'm not sure which color that is actually.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, he said good afternoon.
My colleagues and I remain squarely focused on achieving our dual mandate goals of maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people. The U.S. economy has been expanding at a solid pace. While job gains have remained low, the unemployment rate has been little changed in recent months.
He's literally reading
Inflation
this.
has moved up and is elevated, in part reflecting the recent increase in global energy prices. Today, the FOMC decided to leave our policy rate unchanged. We see the current stance of monetary policy as appropriate to promote progress toward our maximum employment and 2% inflation goals. Developments in the Middle East are contributing to a high level of uncertainty about the economic outlook, and we will remain attentive to risks to both sides of our dual mandate. I'll have more to say about monetary policy after briefly reviewing economic developments. Recent indicators suggest that economic activity has been expanding at a solid pace. Consumer spending has been resilient, and business fixed investment has continued to expand at a brisk pace. In contrast, activity in the housing sector has remained weak. In the labor market, the unemployment rate was 4.3% in March and has changed little in recent months. Job gains have remained low. A good part of the slowing in the pace of the job growth over the past year reflects a decline in the growth of the labor force due to lower immigration and labor force participation.
Diego, you still in the house
Though
or
labor
what?
demand has clearly softened as well. Other indicators, including job openings, layoffs, hiring, and nominal wage growth, generally show little change in recent months. Inflation has moved up recently and is elevated relative to our 2% longer run goal. Estimates based on the Consumer Price Index and other data indicate that total PCE prices rose 3.5% over the 12 months ending in March, boosted by the significant rise in global oil prices that has resulted from the conflict in the Middle East. Excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 3.2% over the 12 months ending in March. This relatively high rate largely reflects the effects of tariffs on prices in the goods sector. Near-term measures of inflation expectations have risen this year, likely because of the substantial rise in oil prices. Most measures of longer-term expectations remain consistent with our 2% inflation goal.
Literally just reading this.
Our monetary policy actions are guided by our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. At today's meeting, the committee decided to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 3.5 to 3.75%. The economic outlook
wait for
remains
the question
highly
period, see
uncertain,
what
and
happens.
the conflict in the Middle East has added to this uncertainty. In the near term, higher energy prices will push up overall inflation. Beyond that, the scope and duration of potential effects on the economy remain unclear, as does the future course of the conflict itself. We will continue to monitor the risks to both sides of our dual mandate. We are well positioned to determine the extent and timing of additional adjustments to our policy rate based on the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. Monetary policy is not on a preset course, and we will make our
All right,
decisions
now
on
we're
a
gonna push up.
meeting-by-meeting basis.
Yeah, let's just get out of this trade.
This is my last press conference as chair, and I will close with a few thoughts. First, I want to congratulate Kevin Warsh on his advancement out of the Senate Banking Committee this morning. This is an important step forward, and I wish him well as that process continues. The Federal Reserve exists for one fundamental purpose: to foster the economic conditions in which American families and
Fed Powell's
businesses can
getting kind of
thrive.
emotional right now.
Stable prices, a strong job market, and a financial system they can depend on. Every
Kinda looks
decision
like
we
my
make,
grandma, I ain't
whether
gonna
about
lie.
interest rates or regulatory and supervisory matters or other issues, is made
No
in
hate on
service
Jerome.
of that purpose. Our decisions reflect the collective judgment of the Board of Governors and the Federal Open Market Committee, colleagues who demonstrate analytical rigor, principled judgment, and a genuine commitment to the public interest. Our collaborative
we're
and
gonna
deliberative
push.
process has long reflected a
let's see.
shared commitment
put in a
to
long.
finding common ground in service to our mission. This institution is resilient, capable, and staffed by professionals of extraordinary talent and exceptional dedication. It has been a privilege to serve alongside so many great public servants at the Board of Governors and around the Federal Reserve System. The Fed's work is only as effective as the public's understanding of it, and you, the press, are essential to keeping the public informed about what we do and why. The people we serve benefit from your careful reporting. I welcomed the announcement last Friday by the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia that she had closed the criminal investigation. She also noted, however, that she would not hesitate to restart the investigation. Over the weekend, the Department of Justice provided assurances that they will not reopen the investigation unless there's a criminal referral from the Fed's Inspector General. And, absent such a referral, if they do appeal the recent court decision, they would not seek, as part of that appeal, to restart the investigation or send new subpoenas. I've said that I will not leave the board until this investigation is well and truly over with transparency and finality, and I stand by that. I'm encouraged by recent developments, and I'm watching the remaining steps in this process carefully. My decisions on these matters will continue to be guided entirely by what I
Powell don't
believe
wanna
is
go
in the
to
best
jail, that's
interest
for
of the
sure.
institution and the people we serve. After my term as chair ends on May 15, I will continue to serve as a governor for a period of time to be determined. I plan to keep a low profile as a governor. There's only ever one chair of the Federal Reserve Board. When Kevin Warsh is confirmed and sworn in, he will be that chair. Once sworn in as board chair, his new colleagues will elect him to chair the FOMC as well. As I regularly point out from this podium, our success in delivering our goals matters for all Americans. I'm confident that the Fed will continue to do its work with objectivity, integrity, and a deep commitment to serve the American people. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the kind words about the press. Often doesn't come from the podium in different places, but appreciate that. Can you talk about what is gone into your decision to remain on the board? What kind of criteria are you weighing, and how long might you stay? Thank you.
Sure. So, my concern is really about the series of legal attacks on the Fed, which threaten our ability to conduct monetary policy without considering political factors. And I want to note here, this has nothing whatever to do with verbal criticism by elected officials. I've never suggested that such verbal criticism is a problem, and neither has anyone else here. But these legal actions by the administration are unprecedented in our 113-year history, and there are ongoing threats of additional such actions. I worry that these attacks are battering the institution and putting at risk the thing that really matters to the public, which is the ability to conduct monetary policy without taking into consideration political factors. It is so important for our economy, for the people that we serve, that they can depend over time on a central bank that operates that way, free of political influence. It's part of the absolute foundation of this amazing economy that we have. It's just one of the many reasons why the U.S. economy is the envy of the world. That piece of institutional architecture separates successful countries from unsuccessful countries. It is extremely important, not for the people who work at the Fed at any given time, but for the people that we serve, that the Fed remain able to conduct monetary policy in a way that doesn't get pulled into politics, trying to help or hurt any particular politician or political party. It's critical for the people that we serve. In terms of when I would leave, I will leave when I think it's appropriate to do so. Was that all your questions, or was that?
Well, I just have a follow-up, which is, what would you say to the criticism that by remaining on the board, you're actually taking a political act and denying President Trump the majority of the board, which as president he would have if you left?
I don't see that at all. As I mentioned, you know, I'm literally staying because of the actions that have been taken. I had long planned to be retiring, and you know, the things that have happened in the last 3 months have I think left me no choice but to stay until I see them through at least that long. You know, in addition, I don't see how this will interfere. My intention is not to interfere. You know, I was a governor for almost 6 years, and the tradition is at the Fed that governors who understand how difficult the role of chair is, and as a soon-to-be former chair, I do understand how hard it is to get consensus with 19 strong-minded people. You work with the chair. You try to be heard, but also collaborate with the chair and try to support the chair when you can. When you can't, you can't. And I think that's the attitude that people generally take, and that's the attitude that I'll take.
Nick.
Chair Powell, if I could ask about the inflation outlook. In March, you described the standard practice of looking through energy shocks as conditional on inflation expectations staying anchored. Since that meeting, there has been very little progress reopening key energy trade corridors. Can you help us understand how the inflation outlook has changed in the intermeeting period, beginning with the prospects for tariff pass-through resolving on the timeline that you had outlined in March, before getting to the energy shock that is now on top?
So, you know, I would look at it this way. For a long time, we've been working on the hypothesis, really, that tariffs would lead to a one-time price increase and that would go away over time. In other words, that there would be no further change, so measured inflation wouldn't reflect that higher level going up more and more. And it's time for that to happen. You know, we really do expect that to be happening in the next 2 quarters. So we'll be watching very carefully to see that what we've thought all along would happen. That's the kind of critical part of the forecast. We need to really see that. With energy, it's so hard to say. I mentioned, you know, in sort of the textbook, you would look through an oil shock because they tend to be short-lived and they tend to revert, and monetary policy works with long and variable lags, so you wouldn't necessarily react right away. I think that is all the more true given that we're several years above 2% inflation and that we're already looking through the tariff shock. So I think we're going to be very cautious about that. But the question about looking through energy really is not in front of us right now. It hasn't even peaked yet. And I think we'd want to see the backside of that and progress on tariffs before we even thought about reducing rates.
So if I could follow up, the statement today preserves language that has taken on some meaning as it was socialized when the committee was actively lowering rates. Why is that easing bias still ripe, given how different the inflation outlook is now versus a meeting or two ago? And what more would have to happen for it to get evicted?
So that was, as you will recall, we had a discussion about that at the last meeting, and we talked about it in the press conference after the March meeting. We had the same today. We had quite a vigorous discussion about that very issue and the guidance, and is it still appropriate, and that kind of thing. And I would say that the number of people on the committee who either could support that language changing to a more neutral stance so that a hike is as likely as a cut, that number has increased over the intermeeting period, and it's easy to see why. I mean, it's a good question, right? You see, inflation has moved up over the interim a bit. Core inflation's 3.2 now, moving, albeit just a little bit, in the wrong direction. And we know that there will be, that there's headline inflation coming out of the Gulf, and we don't know how much that will be. We're going to need to see. So it makes all the sense in the world that people would look at that and we'd have a vigorous discussion about that. You saw that 3 people dissented over the language. I think all of those people agreed with the rate decision. So the majority of the committee did not want to do that, and I didn't think we needed to do it at this meeting. It really was just a question of why do we need to do that now? We have so much to learn. There's so much uncertainty about the path ahead. There doesn't need to be any rush to make that decision now, because what happens in the next 30, 60 days, even by the next meeting, could really change the picture around that language. So, it's a much closer thing on the committee than it was in March, and that makes all the sense in the world, it seems to me.
Claire.
So Claire Jones, Financial Times. Just going back to this issue of the easing bias, we've now got oil approaching $120 a barrel when it comes to the benchmark Brent crude. If it stays around those levels 6 weeks from now, what would be your best guess as to whether the easing bias will still be in the statement? Thank you.
I wouldn't want to guess. Well, first of all, we're going to have new leadership in all likelihood by then, and new leadership's going to have a very important role to play in that. So I won't be standing here at this podium to answer your question. So I don't know. As I mentioned, that's all I can really say is that we had a great discussion about that today. It's gotten to be a better question in the interim period. We had the discussion. A majority are still on the page of not feeling the need to move to that level. And that's where I am. I get it, though. At a certain point, you would move, and that conceivably could come as soon as the next meeting.
Thank you. Just to follow on, the new leadership also seemed rather lukewarm on press conferences and on the dot plots. What would your advice to him be on these communication tools? So
I'm not going to give him any advice through you today here, but I think communications generally is. I think every incoming chair takes a look at communications, and it's a very healthy thing. I mean, communications it's very complex, and you can always be looking at new things. And if that happens, it feels like it's going to happen. That's a completely appropriate thing.
Neil.
Hi, Chair Powell, Neil Owen with Axios. Can you tell us if you've been in touch with incoming Chairman Warsh? To what extent is this a normal transition process?
From Axios.
All things swirling around, something unusual, and what can we expect when he takes that podium in a few weeks?
I haven't seen him since seeing him at a dinner in January where I congratulated him and had a nice chat with him. Haven't seen him. I don't know what a normal process is. The last process was with Janet Yellen, with whom I had worked for 6 years, and so it was. We were sitting down the hall from each other, so it was a very different thing. I think this is and will be a very normal, standard kind of a transition process. So that's what I expect. I have every reason to think it will be.
Quick follow-up: is the Supreme Court ruling on Governor Cook a factor in when you may leave as a governor?
I wasn't thinking of it as such, but no, not really. I mean, I'm thinking more of the other things I mentioned.
Chris.
Hi, thanks for taking our question. I wanted to ask a question about your tenure, and Chris Rugaber at Associated Press. During your tenure as chair, you often spoke about how disadvantaged Americans benefited from extended periods of low unemployment. In the new framework the Fed adopted in 2020, some economists say elevated the Fed's employment mandate. Are you worried that the pandemic inflation spike that followed will make future Fed chairs more reluctant to pursue a hot jobs market, and should they be?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, what we experienced in the teens, the mid-teens, was really low levels of unemployment for a long period of time and no reaction from inflation. And we all very much took notice of that. We also noticed that the biggest wage gains were going to people at the bottom end of the income spectrum. And we had many reports of I mean, it felt like a fairly stable equilibrium, and a lot of benefits were flowing to people at the bottom end of the income spectrum, including companies were, setting up in people who were confined and like training them before they got out, and it was a very healthy sort of set of societal dynamics. So of course, I think anybody would love to get back to that. I don't think that anything that happened to create the global pandemic inflation was in any way related to overweighting the employment market. I mean, it was a global shock that happened essentially very, very similarly all over the world. That had to do with closing, reopening, stimulus, and all that. And I mean, you could look at a graph of 10 big economies on the page and not know which was the U.S. and which was Germany, France, and things like that. So I don't think that insight was in any way responsible for the high inflation that we experienced. So, I mean, I think it's always been a balance. You've got to be strong on both of our dual mandates, and we for example, now we don't feel that the labor market is at all a source of inflation, so we don't need to be worrying about that. It's been a long time since we have had to worry about that. Well, actually, during the pandemic recovery, the labor market was super overheated and tight, and that's when we had to worry about it, but not now.
Just on the other issue, do you need more assurance from the Justice Department before stepping down? Is that what you're waiting for, or what else?
I'm waiting, for the investigation to be well and truly over with finality and transparency, and I'm waiting for that, and I will leave when I think it's appropriate to do so.
Michael McKee.
Michael McKee from Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'd like to ask you if you could explain a little more or characterize a little more the discussion about the two-sided view and interest rates, because there were some members of the Open Market Committee who've been suggesting that we may need to raise interest rates even absent the war because inflation was not coming down fast enough. Is there any sense that interest rates might have to go up, or was this just a setup to sort of warn people that you're worried about the war impacts?
So nobody, the three dissenters and others who could have supported that, and others who were, who were voters and non-voters who preferred it, they all supported the right decision, right? So people are not saying we need to hike now. It's more a question of, don't we kind of feel that we should be neutral? And what are markets doing? People argue that this is consistent with markets are doing. And again, it's a very fair question, but these changes, there is, it's a form of forward guidance, and you want to make them in a way that will be sustained and continue to make sense, and not something you need to take back, fairly quickly. So I think we just, a group of us, including me, didn't feel like we needed to be in a hurry on that markets are not confused about our reaction function. We don't have a problem to solve on that. But the other side of the argument is a good argument too, as I mentioned. It's a perfectly good argument to be having, good discussion to be having. So, and it came out the way it came out.
Well, you've got three dissents in favor of two-sided warning. You've got yourself staying on the board. You've got the criticism that does come from elected officials, and you've got a lot of critics who have faulted the Fed for being too slow 2021 with inflation. Are you worried about Fed credibility under all of this? Is that one reason that you want to stay on?
Not driving my thinking now. I mean, monetary policy is going to get made by, 19 people. There's a lot of stability there. I mean, if you think about it, every new Fed chair has the same situation, which is you've got 18 colleagues on the FOMC, 11 of them vote during any year, and your job is to create consensus. It's to talk to them, understand them, be inside their thinking, and be able to pull them together and get consensus and move. And that's what every Fed chair has to do. And I think Kevin Warsh is actually quite well. He has the capabilities, skills to be very good at that, I would think. So I think I'm not so worried about that process. I think that'll work itself out.
Howard.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Howard Schneider with Reuters. You mentioned that staying on as a governor, you intend to keep a low profile. I'm just wondering if you could give us a little more detail on what that looks like and how you can... Touche. Walk down the steps. What that looks like, and particularly around the policy discussion, how you're able to have your intervention and not be a shadow chair and not have a kind of an outsized influence over the process.
Yeah, that's just something I would never do. The shadow chair thing. No, I don't know what the exact specifics of it will be, but I'm going back to being a governor. I respect the role of chair. Particularly with Chair Yellen, to whom I was close when I worked with Chairman Bernanke for 2 years, but I was brand new at that time, so I got a sense of what it was, and I had real sympathy for how hard it is to get that group to consensus. And I always felt like I don't want to add to that unnecessarily, and that means try to support the chairs where the direction the chair wants to go, and if you can. If you can't, you can't. And I think that's the way it's always worked there, because the chair only has one vote, plus the ability to develop consensus. And if people won't be, they won't, if they're not flexible at all, then how do you ever do that? And so that's why the authority the chair has really is to develop relationships with people and work with them, and then put something forward that has consensus. And I propose to be a very constructive participant in that process. Really out of respect for the office of the chair.
And
not going to move right away.
Your view as a soon-to-be governor, how do you see the risks of oil prices bleeding into core inflation in coming weeks? Because that was, it seems like the commentary that was coming from particularly some of the Reserve Bank presidents, there were elevated concerns about the bleed into core, and here we are with 3 dissents now. What do you see as the prospect of a core inflation?
Those prospects are real. Remember, though, they're real, and the real thing is we're going to have to wait and see.
I'm not saying that because you're a bad person, but her going missing for disappearance,
very good place for us to wait and see.
If you acknowledge how it happened, where it happened, and information, that emotion's not going to feel sincere because you will be aware
the labor
of what
market
happened.
shows more and more signs of stability.
If I knew anything, I promise you, I would tell you. Like, I am willing to take a lie detector test, whatever the you want, but I don't know anything. He's never mentioned anything. I've never seen any signs.
You know what you
I
think about
tried watching
Powell's
her
tie?
like a hawk. I thought I was doing a good job, but I wasn't.
Regardless of whether Jennifer was aware of the situation, the reality remains that Madeline hasn't yet been found, and uncovering where she is and what may have happened to her is still the priority.
We currently have upwards probably 200 people working on.
Fortunately, we're in a good place to
anybody
wait,
who is somebody is involved.
Yeah.
So, regardless of the circumstances, those people don't get to go home.
Mr. Chairman.
Those people don't get to go back to their families. Those people don't get to live their lives and go back to their primary job. This isn't something that's going to stop or go away. I can tell you, I know detectives expressed to you that the thought process at this point is this is a homicide investigation. Based on the evidence I've seen, based on the videos I've seen.
Further review of the surveillance footage, which shows Madeline traveling with Stefan in the early hours of February 26th, leads detectives to draw a heartbreaking conclusion. They note that the slumped position with her head leaning is not a common sitting position, and horrifically, perhaps indicates that Madeline may not be alive. Additionally, footage captured in a parking garage shows what appears to be Stefan carrying Madeline from the front passenger seat to the trunk at approximately 9:41 a.m., the time when Stefan claimed to be meandering around while waiting for the vape store to open. Without her body, however, their conclusion is only a theory. Meanwhile, a startling admission by Jennifer will soon lead to a brutal confrontation by the detective, whose patience appears to be wearing thin.
Have you talked to Chris about
Put in another long here on the practice again.
on those changes. So, I'm not going to go into the real small specifics, but what we found very quickly was that making changes, making really large changes, for example, to the dot plot or the SEP.
No. I knew that was true, right? That's evidence. That's for real. That's
with anything that had really broad support on the committee.
But I kept thinking,
and so we just moved on. We didn't really do as much on that as we might have. And,
I can't tell you why my brain kept thinking, no, he didn't tell her.
No breaking news from Powell.
She's still missing, she's still out there, she would take it.
And,
yes.
it's something, like I said, I think every new chair is going to look at our suite of communications and think
but
about
I swore she was still, I felt in my body she was still alive, she was still out there.
Major central bank that doesn't publish a forecast.
I told Chris to get him a lawyer because I felt like you guys were chasing the wrong person.
You try to do that at the
but you
board.
weren't.
That's hard. At the committee, that's hard. It's hard if you do it at the staff. So it works. I think our communications are fine.
Her replies to the details about the severity of Madeleine's assaults appear to be the final straw for the detective, as his confrontation grows more heated.
You prioritized him by offering him, or telling his dad to get him a lawyer.
If I could follow up on Mike's question about hikes, are we right to assume that the hawkish outcome for the Fed is still one in which the committee just extends the pause in rate cuts? And to what extent is there a growing sense within the committee that monetary policy really isn't just restrictive at all right now? The economy is holding up relatively well, despite this major energy shock. The unemployment rate has ticked lower. Inflation was moving sideways even before the war and is now moving higher. So where is
She
the
was a
committee
child
at
since
that
her
debate?
victimization started. It occurred under your roof, and you acted like it didn't exist.
Is in a good place.
And knowing the victimization, knowing how ongoing it is, knowing that you saw a picture of it, not just us telling you, not me and him saying, hey, listen, you
signal the opposite. I think
they had a bad relationship.
Because we feel like
they showed you
we're in a good place to move
and you
direction.
Still protected.
Nobody's calling for.
So how am I supposed to not think that the thought process in your mind is until she's found, Stephen can't be charged with murder? Because we both now know that you don't want him to be charged with murder because you want him to have a lawyer.
On top of this range ball
that was then. That was then. Everything that you guys have shown me since then and have shown me that he's
so we have to show you a picture of her dead in a car for you to finally not take his side.
Despite his theory that Madeleine is deceased, they've yet to locate any sign of her remains. If their devastating theory is correct, the question remains: what motive would Stephen have to end her life?
Exporter of energy.
What do you think made him
economy is far less energy intensive, oil intensive than it was during the 70s.
I don't know.
The effects
I keep hearing
on
theories, because here's the deal. You don't go home until she's found.
No, I know.
Western Europe or Asia, who are feeling much greater effects from these things. The effects we're feeling in the current situation currently, and in sort of what's priced in, which is a relatively quick outcome. If this goes on for much longer and prices go much higher, then we'll feel that much more. And of course, I'm talking about aggregate inflation numbers. We know, we're very well aware that people are experiencing higher gas prices all over the country now, and that hurts. And those hikes may continue to happen. And other things are going to start to reflect airline fares I mentioned and other products and services that are dependent upon petroleum and derivatives of petroleum. People are going to start to feel that.
I know.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Edward Lawrence with Fox Business. So I guess I'll just ask you directly on this. The markets don't see a rate cut at all this year, is what they're predicting. Do you think we're at the neutral rate? Why or why not?
So he had access
the
to
neutral rate is we can know with certainty.
And I think Lunesta.
Pretty close to the neutral rate. Yeah, I always have between 3 and 4%.
Benzodiazepines or anxiety medications, which relax you and can make you sleepy.
Reasonable, but at the higher end of the range of what I would consider reasonable
and
neutral rate.
And Lunesta, I think, is a sleeping medication.
I think the labor
like
market is still probably cooling off just a little bit.
So I don't know if it's possible he gave her something. She was drugged. In those photos that you showed me where you're saying she said maybe she was drugged.
Policy looking, meaningfully restrictive, maybe mildly restrictive or neutral,
dead.
I would say.
And it was done upstairs.
I can just only imagine that he choked her. The first time we've seen default now since October of 2019.
Horrifically, a search for the medication sevoflurane was discovered in Stephen's Google account on February 12th and 14th. It's described as a volatile anesthetic that provides hypnosis and amnesia and is most commonly used for surgical procedures. An additional search was made to determine whether or not the medication would show up in tests. Still, based on what he's seen, the detective isn't willing to entertain the idea that Madeline was merely sleeping.
We had
He drove out of there Monday morning. He discarded her backpack in the trash dumpster. He discarded her laptop in one shoe.
So
all her property was
every
discarded.
supply
They
shock
look
has
like
the capability
she's gone.
of
He doesn't
driving
have evidence
inflation
for it.
up and unemployment.
But then you have all these
And
suspicious
what
times
do
of
you
when he's
do?
left, come back, he's gone
the
here,
central
gone
bank has
there.
a really
So
hard
what
time
do you
knowing
think
what
he
to
was
do.
doing
So the
on
right
all
thing
these
to do is to
suspicious
try to
times?
balance the
He's
achievement
roaming
of those two
192.
goals, and
What
that's
do
what
you
our
think?
framework calls for
Knowing
us to
what you
do.
know now we can
But
play.
these are really tough,
You know she's dead. You know
difficult
you give
judgments. You've got to have a forecast for each variable. You've got to think how long it's going to take to get back to target. You got to think how restrictive or not is policy. So it's only natural that you have a range of
So
views on the
him
committee.
leaving early in the
People are
morning
gonna
and
see
driving
different ways.
around
They're going to have different risk
aimlessly
tolerances
somewhere.
and that kind of thing. I mean, if everybody agreed,
I feel like
that
he
would
stashed
be,
the body at that time.
that would be surprising.
When he
And
came back
I think it's only
and then left
it's
again.
partly a function of
But
the
each daytime,
extraordinarily
like,
challenging
how could you move a
set
body
of
or move
supply
something
shocks
in
that we've been
daytime
dealing
and
with
not
now for
move?
5-6 years.
But like, I feel like he went back to check.
Thank you so much, Chair
to make sure
Powell.
he did a
Selena
good job,
Wayne with
or
ABC News.
to
Are you
move the body
confident that
again?
Kevin Warsh will stand up to
No.
political pressure from President
Detectives
Trump?
would eventually discover what Stephen was doing in Northport, along with a shocking discovery, which will be revealed later.
And when it comes to
Still,
gas, right now it's
Stephen
over
has
$4
54
a
minutes of
gallon.
unaccounted for
Inflation just
activity in
hit
the
a
area of
2-year
St. Cloud,
high.
9
Should Americans
miles from
expect to be
Kissimmee.
paying
Jennifer,
higher gas
however,
prices
claims
for
she
the
has
rest
no
of this
idea what
year?
he
And
may
in
have
your
been doing
view,
there
does
on the
that
morning
take
of February
a rate cut
26th.
off of the table?
I didn't
And
think he
secondly,
ever,
by
like,
staying
even
on
knew
as Fed governor, what
where
message
St.
do you
Cloud
think
was,
you're
'cause
sending
we've
to the
never driven
president?
down that way
I
ever.
don't know what
So you
gas
didn't
prices are
consider
going to
that.
do for the
Yeah, I
rest of
know,
the year.
but to me,
And,
he's never had a reason to ever
It will
drive down
depend
to
on
St.
how
Cloud.
long the strait remains
Like, ever.
closed and how quick
Investigators continue to pry information from Jennifer,
when gas prices
unaware
go
of
up,
just how close they are to
that's
a major
disposable income
breakthrough.
coming out of
For
people's
now,
pockets, so
Jennifer
they're gonna spend
poses a
less on other
dark and
things. So
twisted
there
theory
will be
for
a hit
where
to
they
GDP.
might search for
So
Madeline.
it's a,
If I were him,
it's a question whether spending
and I had to
goes
stash a
down
body, but I
to
would never, I
offset
would never,
the inflationary
my mind
effects.
would say to
So
go to Lake
it's
Toho.
not, the
There's
answer
a lot
isn't
of woods
obvious.
there, there's a lot of gators.
Ex ante,
Like I told
whether
you,
you
it's gonna come to a
should move
point
your
where
rate over because of that.
Right.
We'll
Volusia
have to
County
see how it
Sheriff's Office
evolves.
just found somebody the other day that's been missing for a long time.
By staying
We'll
on?
get
I'll
found.
stand on what I said earlier.
Sometimes it's quick, sometimes it's not quick, but we will find her.
Victoria.
What you need to think about is when we find her,
Hi, Victoria
there
Guido
now
with
two
Politico.
more chance.
During
that
your
we're going to
tenure,
prove
Fed
that
independence
she's
has
not
come under
assistant,
pressure in a
full
lot of
capability
different
in this
ways.
investigation.
And I was just
And if that
wondering,
is true,
practically
you need to think
speaking,
about the
where do you
consequences
see
of that.
Fed independence as coming
Consequences
from?
of
Is it
hindering
the
a murder
law? Is
investigation
it
or a
political
capital sexual
support from
battery
Congress?
investigation
Is
could
it
be
the actions of
punishable
the
up to
Fed?
probably the same charges.
What sustains
same
Fed
time in jail.
independence?
Well, it's,
I know you
to
know
a
that I
significant
don't
extent,
believe
it
what
is
you're
the
saying. I
law.
know you know that I
And,
think you
we've
prioritize
had to go
that.
to court to successfully so far to defend it. But, the law does create a setting in which the Fed can and is directed to make monetary policy without consideration of political factors. And so part of it is the law, but it goes beyond that, though. There's a set of customs. There's a boundary line between the Fed and the administration, between the Fed and the Treasury Department, and we need to continue to respect those boundaries about what the Fed is responsible for and what the Treasury is responsible for, and what the rest of the administration is responsible for. So some of it is legal. In fact, it's all legal at the end of the day. But it's more than just monetary policy. We don't want to use our tools to. We haven't wanted to use our tools to achieve goals that are really clearly outside our mandate. Every administration looks at our tools and thinks that would be good to repurpose those to serve other purposes. But that's dragging us into politics and into fiscal policy. So we've resisted that.
Well, and maybe another way of asking it, too, is do you think that Fed independence is as strong now as when you became chair? And if so, why?
Look, I think it's at risk. I mean, I think these legal assaults, if you will, as I mentioned, the institution is being battered over these things. We're having to resort to, the courts to enforce our legal, it's not so much independence. It's really the ability to make monetary policy without political considerations. that's what we're talking about. And we've had to do that, and we've been successful so far, but that's not over. None of that is concluded yet. And it's, it's really important. It's not about people who work at the Fed or the institution. It's about the benefits of a central bank that makes decisions based on analysis and our best thinking, rather than trying to help or hurt politicians. It's that there's a bright line between central banks who do one and do the other, and successful countries have uniformly, successful advanced economy countries have a really strong set of protections around their central bank just for that reason. So that's what it's all about. I think I am confident, as I said in my remarks, that the Fed will continue to make its decision based on analysis, rigorous analysis, and not on political considerations. But we've had to fight for it, and I'd like to think that I'd like to think we can get out of that era and go back to respecting, what the law says and what custom has been, which is to, let the Fed do our thing. It's an institution full of human beings who work super hard to get things right for the benefit of the public. We're all human. Don't expect for perfection, but do expect us to make, decisions without political considerations and the very best analysis we can bring.
Katerina Saraiva, Bloomberg News. How would you characterize what you've heard from your colleagues on your decision to stay? Do you have their support? And then have you heard concern from your colleagues about continued legal attacks from the executive branch? Is this something that others have, talked to you about?
So I think that I don't want to report on what my colleagues think. They can speak for themselves. But there are widespread concerns that these things may continue. That's all I'll say. And and that would be a problem. And so.
And then I just also wanted to ask about Governor Waller's speech on the reserve banks.
Talk as a 5 words.
What, do you have any thoughts on centralizing some of those functions in the way he described? And then, are you concerned that something like that could potentially be a slippery slope to consolidate reserve bank functions even more in such a way where the central bank ultimately loses some of that important regional information?
So we try to be good stewards of the public's money and efficient.
At 4 p.m., just minutes after Jennifer's interrogation comes to a frustrating end, a call reaches detectives about a witness who claimed to see the suspect vehicle and a man fitting Stefan's description changing a tire near Hickory Tree Road, the location where Stefan disappeared from cameras in St. Cloud. The witness reveals the exact location where locked gates separate the road from an area of private property. The property owner gives police permission to enter, and horrifically, tucked inside a long expanse of bamboo trees, Madeline's body is discovered. She's found wearing a green-colored sweatshirt and blue jeans, and her body is covered by pieces of what appeared to be hay or dry grass. The bottoms of her socks are clean, suggesting she was carried. Records would also reveal the sickening purpose of Stefan's trip to Northport while his family slept at the hotel. According to police records, at 6:34 a.m., just after arriving in Northport, Stefan attempted to log into his Google account. It was later that Chris discovered the hard drive for Stefan's computer had been removed and placed in a bin at Chris's storage facility. He handed it over to the police, where it was found
your stewardship at the Fed will be remembered
to contain over 35,000 explicit images of children. In a call between Chris and Stefan recorded from the jail, Stefan is confronted with the grim reality of a long future behind bars.
You talked about those 4 big shocks, supply shocks over the past 5 years, and inflation still misbehaving. What's your message to American families who feel like inflation has not been under control for them really since the COVID reopening?
I haven't missed much.
We're committed to bring inflation
Powell's just been around
back to
long.
2% sustainably. That's our goal, and we'll stick at it until that happens.
Markets
Without getting these events keep happening, which
there was a way
drive
that,
costs.
you and I can have a conversation, all of us could have a
The best thing
conversation
we
to
can do is
understand
to use our tools to guide inflation back back down to 2%.
how this came
I think
about,
trying to get there
how
really
you
quickly
arrived
could be
here,
very
because
costly in terms
it would help us
of job
better
loss and things
understand
like
the
that.
situation, because
We
we're
try to
just
get there over time
like
in a way
lost,
that does the least damage possible. And
for
our commitment
understanding
to that is
how all this came about.
never-ending
I
and
mean, we're just
unshakable.
totally
How would you describe
baffled.
the economy outside of the misbehaving inflation?
You didn't start it, but you participated in it, which is just as bad as not starting it, but that's for another
I
day.
don't know that you can be awfully resilient. So it's actually quite resilient, I would say, because it's a positive thing. If I can have that amendment. Yeah, growth is really solid across our economy.
I think
Some
we're
of that
always going to be
is
reported.
that consumer
So
spending is
there
hanging in
won't be an
pretty well.
opportunity
The
to
most
do
recent
that.
data are good.
A later
And
autopsy
some
would
of it
rule
is just
Madeline's
the
cause of
apparently
death as
insatiable demand for
strangulation.
data centers all over the
Though an
United
exact
States.
time
So
of death could not be
a lot
determined,
of, business
investigators
investment
believe
going
she
into
was
building data
deceased
centers and
before she
every
was
reason to
taken
think
out of
that
the
continues.
apartment
So
and
you've
was
got an
killed
economy
either
that's
the night of
growing
her birthday
at
party
2%
or
better.
early the following
PDFP, which
morning.
is private domestic
The
cloud
footage of the young girl
purchases
seen
thing,
wandering
which
away
is
from
really
the
a
church
better
Monday
signal
morning was not Madeline,
of a
but
momentum,
an
and the economy's
unfortunate
actually higher
coincidence
than
that the
that.
person
So
on camera bore a
that's,
similar
that's a positive
resemblance.
thing.
Stefan is being held without bond and is currently facing multiple charges, including 13 counts of sexual battery, 7 counts of lewd molestation,
for a long time. So
molestation, 39 counts of unlawful possession of obscene materials, and first-degree capital murder. On April 26, 2024, 37-year-old Stefan Michael Stearns entered a plea of not guilty. His jury trial is set to begin on September 22nd.
All right, this plays playing out.
Kind of a balance where people who don't have jobs will have a hard time breaking in unless somebody quits their job. So, so that's pretty good. You know, inflation is the thing we need to work on. And it's partly tariffs, which we think that inflation should subside over the course of this year because it's kind of a one-time increase. It shouldn't be repeated, and that should start happening pretty soon. The energy inflation that we're getting should go through fairly quickly, and we'll just have to see how that works out. In the meantime, you know, we think our policy stance is in a good place for us to hold and wait developments.
Jennifer. Thank you, Chair Powell. Jennifer Schonberger with Yahoo Finance. At the risk of beating the dead horse here, clearly 3 members objected to keeping that easing bias in the statement. And you said that the majority still didn't need to move to new language at this point. So does the majority of the committee still have a bias towards cuts at this point, or has the bias on the committee shifted away from cuts towards holding or hikes if that was needed?
When a young Mennonite woman was found
the center
dead
is
in
moving
Arizona,
toward a more neutral place, and that's sort of what markets are saying too. I just think, you know, there's a lot of signaling going on when you change guidance like that, and so we just, I guess a majority of us didn't feel like we needed to send a signal on that right now, but maybe it'll come to that, and the reason is because, you know, we're kind of waiting to see what happens with events in the Middle East and what are the implications of those events for the U.S. economy. So there's a group who feels like we don't need to be in a hurry to do that. We get it, and of course we will move to a hiking bias if we want to hike, and we'll move to a neutral bias before that. But there was a difference over whether to do it at this meeting, at a meeting at which all but one of us agreed that the rate decision was correct, which was not to move.
And you just said moments ago that you believe Fed independence is at risk. Is it safe to say that you want to stay on as a governor to serve as a check and balance on that?
I want to stay until I will stay until I feel it's appropriate for me to leave. And yes, that is really what is driving this. I'm not looking to be, you know, a high-profile dissident or anything like that. I'm more looking at the other aspects of this and wanting to see that things have calmed down and we're returning to a traditional model of working with the people that you have and bringing them to consensus and respecting that consensus. That's what I'm hoping to see.
Matt Egan.
Thanks, Chair Powell. Matt Egan with CNN. You've made many tough decisions in your time at the Fed, and as your time as chair comes to a close and you think about your tenure and perhaps your legacy, are there any decisions that stand out as ones that you're particularly proud of? And are there any that with the benefit of hindsight, you would take a mulligan on?
Yeah, it's hard. I wouldn't want to single out individual things at this point. I'll just say, all of us together have consistently tried to do what we think is best for the American people based on our tools and our objectives that Congress has given us. It's been very challenging because we've been in a situation of supply shocks really for 6 years, and that's just a very different situation than for a very long time. What the Fed and other central banks were doing all the time was demand management. And, and there was always the inflation mandate, but inflation was low for 25 years. So this is a very different world and a much more challenging one where you have to balance the two objectives. And by the way, central banks that have an inflation mandate have to do exactly the same thing because they're balancing economic activity. So that's been challenging, and we've tried to do our very best through these really challenging times, and I'm really proud of the work that I've done, that my colleagues and I have done during these years.
Now, to follow up on some of the discussion around Fed independence, can you explain to the public why this notion of Fed independence, which might sound kind of wonky to some, is so critical? I mean, what are the consequences if either the Supreme Court rules against Lisa Cook or the Fed in the future decides to make decisions more around the political calendar instead of the economic data?
So every major advanced economy in the world has made the same decision the United States has made, and that is that they want to take the making of monetary policy, the setting of interest rates to support the economy, to achieve maximum employment and price stability. They want to take that out of the direct control of elected politicians. And the reason is elected politicians are always running for election, and they'll always want low rates, and that will lead to inflation over time. So after literally centuries of experience with that, the whole world moved to a different model, and it's worked great. I mean, this is the era in which inflation was under control for 40 years. Then we had the pandemic inflation everywhere in the world, and now we have inflation that has gone pretty much all the way back to target, really close to all the way back to target, and now is being buffeted by the energy shock, and the U.S. buffeted by the tariff shock as well. So, but what I would say to the general public is that's the backstory, is that don't think about an institution being independent. Think about it this way, that you want people to make monetary policy and set interest rates to benefit the general public and to try to achieve economic goals, which are maximum employment and price stability, and focus only on that and ignore political considerations completely. Ignore them. This isn't bipartisan. This is nonpartisan. So we just work directly for the American people doing these things. We don't think, I want to do this because the president says it's a good idea, or because there's an election coming up and I want to speed up or slow down the economy. I mean, think about that. If that's what we were doing, we'd have no credibility. Markets would lose faith in us, and our ability to control inflation and have any respect would be gone. And let me say, whatever people say, the markets believe that we will produce 2% inflation. If you look at longer run expectations, markets believe that there's no sense in which our credibility in the markets has weakened. It's just not the case. It's people do get it, that this is our commitment and that we will achieve it, and it's priced in. If you disagree with that, then you can go ahead and bet against the markets, but the markets are pricing in Fed credibility.
The interview takes place in an interrogation room on Luke Air Force Base and is an ideal setup according to the Reed technique.
Thank you, Chair Powell. Richard Escobedo with CBS News. We talked a lot about gasoline prices and even you mentioned airline ticket prices, both of which are up dramatically because of the war in Iran. And so
Trump's taking his Powell's taking his last question.
Other parts of the economy. And if so, how worried are you that will be a drag on growth?
You don't see it in spending yet. You really don't. I mean, as one of your colleagues said, the economy has been resilient. It really has. Not just this time, but it's been remarkably resilient for some years now. The U.S. economy has just powered through shock after shock. And consumers are still spending, and that's what the banks will tell you, credit card companies will tell you, the retail sales numbers that we got most recently. People are still spending. And, how long can that go on in a world where if gas prices were to go up a bunch more, that's taking otherwise spendable money out of people's pockets. But right now, we don't actually see much slowdown in yet, certainly none from this. But you think logically you will, because people have a certain amount of money to spend if they're spending.
Well, we're in Power Hour, only 36 minutes left.
Other spending. But we don't see it yet.
One last thing. You
We got
mentioned those
earnings
economies
after
in
the bell.
Southeast Asia that are particularly dependent on petroleum. They make a lot of the stuff that American consumers buy. So was there any discussion today about whether or not those costs getting passed along to consumers is a real concern, and whether or not that might push up inflation?
So all of those things are in the models that we use to calculate inflation. So they're just parts. You can ask about anything like that, and they have a place. The staff has a place where they're looking at that and pricing in what will happen with higher prices and that kind of thing. So it's there. The effects are not that big yet. We're a huge economy. The import sector is only 10% of the economy, so we're not like a European country where 50% of the external of GDP is in the external sector. We're also, as I mentioned, we're an oil exporter, so we're not feeling the same kind of pain, and we're not likely to feel the same kind of pain that economies in Western Europe and certainly in Asia are feeling.
All right.
Anyway, thank you very much, everyone.
Can you just close it with, I won't see you next time?
I won't see you next time.
Let's get these guys tased.
All right, Trump. Powell just walked out. I won't see you again. Done. All right.
Thoughts, Hogue?
Well, yeah, he's not leaving, but he's also not going to be a helicopter parent. He sounds like he has some pretty good confidence in Warsh. So he's
Well, we're going to
not
be seeing a
shadow
new
chair.
Fed
He's gonna
chair,
let him do his
guys.
thing. But I think he's going to be there to help protect him
Should be fun.
politics.
Yo, thanks. Good stuff. JD, what was your takeaways from that ribbon?
Consumers are still spending money, right? So sit back, relax, see what happens. That's the wait and see policy that he's been dealing with, or the stance that he's taken for the last couple of years. He tripled down on PCE as the Fed's, how do you say it? Their primary inflation gauge. He's sticking with his consistency over time outlook, broad-based price pressures, and not overreacting to sort of.
What do you think about that,
short-term
Diego?
noise. What does it say?
What do you think about Powell's last
uncertainty
statements?
About the fallout of
bullish?
the Iran conflict on the economy and monetary policy, and still wait and see. We're still hovering above 2% inflation. We have for the last 5 years. I believe you said we're at 3.2% year over year on core. So again, tripling down on wait and see.
Christianity is how it was raised.
Oh, okay. Any specific denomination of Christianity?
Mainly they were called Mennonites or Amish. I'm not sure how familiar you are with that.
Not really. Tell me about that.
But basically drive darker colored vehicles. We use flip phones when you have internet, stuff like that. So it was pretty sheltered. You could
pretty sheltered.
Difficult.
I got it.
With this admission, the police now have another unexpected link between Mark and Sasha. They're both Mennonites. When the detective brings up the topic of religion, Mark starts to fumble with his words, indicating that the topic of religion may be something Mark doesn't want to talk about.
In that last 6 months, have you traveled out of state anywhere?
Yes, ma'am. When I came down here, I drove my car from Wisconsin down here.
Oh, okay. So you drove from Wisconsin to Phoenix?
Correct.
Anywhere else?
Pretty much state of Arizona. I try to do as much hiking as possible.
Mark doesn't know it yet, but he's just been caught in his first lie, the first of many. Using words like pretty much, mostly, and similar sentiments are qualifiers and often throw up a red flag to detectives. These words usually indicate half-truths or that there's something the individual may not wish to disclose. In this case, Mark saying that he pretty much stays in Arizona isn't true at all, and he's hiding something very big. He also uses filler sounds such as to delay answering, so he has time to think about his response.
You're probably wondering, why I'm here. So I'm a detective. I'm with Coconino County Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
And I am working a homicide investigation.
Okay.
There was a girl named Sasha Krause that was killed. Did you hear about that case?
I've seen it in the news. Yes, ma'am.
Tell me what you know about the case.
It's basically the news report. She was from New Mexico, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she left home one evening, and they found her in northern Arizona, like Flagstaff area, correct?
Right. So that's the case that I'm working. Any idea now why I'd want to talk to you at all?
Probably because I was traveling up in New Mexico area, probably.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
As the detective reveals why she's here interviewing him, Mark begins to show more and more signs that he may be hiding something. When asked what he knows about Sasha Krause's murder, Mark vaguely says that they found her. This is a soft way to describe something as violent as a homicide.
And they found her in northern Arizona.
When suspects shy away from using realistic words such as murdered or killed, this can be a red flag for possible deception as they're minimizing the crime. Additionally, Mark uses the qualifier probably 3 times in 8 seconds.
Probably because I was traveling up in New Mexico area, probably.
So we've got these things called license plate readers.
Okay.
And your vehicle hit a license plate reader in that area. So tell me about that. You were traveling then. I'm a little confused because at first you said you hadn't traveled, but now, did you go to New Mexico?
Yes, ma'am.
Your vehicle was picked up on that license plate reader in the general area on the same day actually that she went missing. And so what I'm doing at this point is
new highs. We're short. New highs. Something's going on. We're short Nasdaq 312s.
Woo! Crude on the march higher.
Yeah.
Mohammed.
If I'm not already in a long, which is almost will be hit the stop at point of entry, I was already long.
I talk to everybody, as you can imagine. That's my job. Anybody who's in the area, anybody who could have seen something.
Despite the fact that Mark appears to be intentionally lying, Detective Nagel does a great job of calling him out for it while also remaining non-judgmental. She does this in order to keep Mark from feeling threatened and ending the interview, while also not letting him get comfortable in any of the lies he tells. The more someone repeats a lie, the more confident they will become. She also keeps him calm by not telling him the whole truth about why she's there. Although she's telling Mark that she's just interviewing everyone who got picked up on a certain license plate reader, we know that Mark is actually her #1 suspect, and that he was found through phone records. This is just one example of the ways detectives can lie during interviews in order to get a suspect to tell them the truth.
So why were you in New Mexico that day?
I was planning on going, so I was checking out Mennonite churches. I had traveled up to Flagstaff.
Mark takes a big pause after he says he traveled, followed by his foot twitching, and then he says to Flagstaff.
I traveled.
Did have a long that got stopped at 160.
This is something called a cadence switch, which is essentially a disruption in the flow
Crude,
and inflection of speech. In an interrogation, this can be seen as an indication of something being left out of a story, as the speaker paused and changed their speech pattern.
I was hoping that ski resort was still open.
Yeah.
They were closed due to coronavirus starting up. And so I figured I'd go check out a Mennonite church up in that area. So I knew some people from Wisconsin that used to live there. And I wanted to go just attend because I really been missing that social life.
Yeah.
I used to have Mennonite churches.
Is there any reason why you didn't tell me when I asked you if you've traveled? You didn't mention that to me. Is there a reason you didn't?
No, I'm sorry. My memory just...
Thank you, Bo.
It's not what it used to be. I'm sorry for failing to mention that. I was not trying to hide or withhold information.
Okay, thanks.
Once again, Mark is caught in a lie. While explaining why he was in New Mexico, he mentions that he was wanting to go skiing. However, the ski resort he drove to, the Arizona
no, I haven't been
Snowbowl
on with
Ski
you
Resort
in
in
a little bit,
Flagstaff,
but something I've
was
really been
closed due
harping
to
on as a
COVID-19
range trader
restrictions.
is making sure
In
that
actuality, the Snowbowl didn't
we're
close
looking
for
at the
COVID until
largest range
March,
possible,
well
and making
after
sure we
Mark
get
would have been
aligned with
there on
that.
January
Look at
18th.
smaller time
As he
frames.
says this,
Sometimes
he
you'll
half
you'll
shrugs
just
with his
end up
right
trading in
shoulder.
the middle of
It's
a
barely
large time frame
perceptible,
range.
but lines up when he
So this
says,
is pretty
I
much
don't
a
know.
perfect range trade.
Internally, he does know, and is just making excuses, but he's not confident in his memory excuse. Mark is also sitting with...
Remains in place. Remains in place. We are seeing...
Whoa.
In Crude. Get the
Sounds
poll
hot.
results in. Get those poll in. Above, below. What we above, below. $110 even in crude oil as we currently trade $108.49. 16 minutes to ROC.
I'm flat, by the way.
Hey, Mo.
That was flat. Okay.
What's
I'm flat at 57 or 58. I'm trading the combine after Powell start talking.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to risk my 50K XFA, which already I made 1,000, almost 1,100.
Whoa.
And this
Let's go,
one,
Mo.
yeah, the combine is 1,400. Four trades only.
All
Michael.
longs?
No. It was short. Pre-market, and then long pre-market, and then short after the market open, and the final one was long. So 2-2.
Nice job, Mo.
More winners.
Good job, Mo. Right, a little bit of a pull. Might be some short covering here. What's Hogue? Let me hit me with a delta, Hogue, when you get a chance. Let's see what this one comes in. This is the
negative.
Crude here.
MOC will be sell side.
Think so, Mohammed?
Sell side? Really?
Mohammed.
Yep. It will be sell side.
Just like that. The Powell speech is in the rearview mirror. Well, we got these earnings again. We got Meta, Amazon, Alphabet, which is Google, and Microsoft after the bell here at the buzzer. Paul and Jay will be breaking that all down on Top Step TV.
I'm going to be interested in the Meta earnings for sure. For sure. What is their CapEx spend going to be? Are they still going to be blowing a bunch of cash on AI? We will see.
Market will be chaos. It will be chaos today. I
What?
mean,
What?
those news, those numbers will be moving the market like crazy because it's not only one, it's 4 big companies announcing. So there is no way they will be all the same. And the behavior of the market will be just crazy.
Well, that's the thing, right? How much downside is there in these equities, knowing that, can we shrug off? Can the equities shrug off oil prices here for the next 23 minutes, knowing that we can look forward to earnings beat and then the guidance? But
I would love to join you, Dolby.
Thank you, Hogue.
On a short? Well, we might get a retest here.
But
we're going to be sitting tight.
The problem here that in my time frame, sellers haven't taken control yet. Yeah, they take one leg down, but you can see this is the smoothing line is inside the moving average channel, which means we might only have a range here. So
no, we're not going to touch it, Mo. We're not going to touch it. This is going to be
nice.
Like Antonio said, this is a skin on fire sort of trade. We just got to stay on fire. Skin on fire, yes. It's just we're going to have to be uncomfortable. It's a 4-hour range trade. So this might bounce back to entry. We might even get stopped out, but the risk reward is there. I mean, we're only risking about $60, but potential is a lot more than that. It's probably 280. Short from 312 3/4. And I still want to sell more at 317s.
Oh man, I'm with you, man.
I think if you got stopped out, that's a signal for a long as well. It's a breakout of that range.
A wheel trade, Dre.
Yeah, well.
Yep.
I've lost. I've been getting destroyed with the wheel play lately too. It works. I'm just
looking at this in hindsight. This is just by the deep dip. You know, it was very deep dip today. Still bullish. Market still bullish. Don't forget that.
Oh, indeed. Indeed. Delta update for you. Minus 5,100 in the ES, plus 3,600 in the NQ. Pull the poll down. Poll. Will crude close above or below $110 even? It was all saying 54% are saying below. So far, so good as we trade $107.85.
Good. JMBA, the wheel trade is a type of strategy where, for example, do you see, or I'll remove this ad, but do you see this stop right here at 27,342? So the wheel trade would be changing that 1 to a 2, and now we would get long at our stop. And then so you're basically going from like a range trade to a breakout trade. So you would cancel out your short, and then you'd be long 1. That is the wheel.
With the same profit. With the same expected profit. So if you are looking for 10 points of a profit, now the wheel trade will be 10 points of profit.
Say this, the market's got to be right for it. I wouldn't say this is the market for it. Maybe like a month ago or 2 months ago. You get taken out by a headline, and it's just going to keep going, keep going, and keep going. This is
just lost the control. Just
who
lost
did?
the
Sellers
temporary control. Yeah, because they took it. However, they didn't confirm it in my chart here. If you move to my chart, you can see here the market is making higher highs from the low, higher highs. Okay, and still it's doing higher highs. And we can see the moving average, the market make that leg, taking the price below the moving average. What I was waiting for, a hold for sellers here, but they haven't yet. So until I see the price with the strong red candle below 7160, that means sellers failed to take control. If they successfully take control, I will short this with a stop just above this wick.
I hope so, Mo. We did just get range under range too on the Nasdaq. So we had the range at the top of the range that we shorted on the 1 minute, and then we broke down through that, and we came up and retested those like 27,000, basically 300s, and failed at 300. So now we have range under range. Can we break now below 27,267? And that would get us to continuation to the downside. If we want, we could move our stop down since we did accept some risk on the pullback. That would put us in the green.
Okay.
What's this?
Yeah, still selling a little bit.
What's this? What's this?
Yeah. I'm looking to limit sell at 71.60 or 61. Let's say 61.
71.60. All right.
I need this to close strong first.
Chat's fired up. We 100% going back up before close. Nice Dolby. Nice short there. New drinking game. Every time you hear a range, you drink. Well, we're hearing a lot of it because we are in range.